Welcome back, Conversational Chaos fans. This is the Rage Monster in the studio with Jason, back with another edition of Conversational Chaos, the intelligent ramblings between Jason and the Rage Monster. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Now, this is, I know what we're going to be talking about today, and I know that you're excited. I can see it all over your face.
Great. You're making me talk about a topic I said I didn't want to discuss again. I remember that as I was coming in this morning.
Really?
Yeah.
Why did we not want to discuss it again?
Well, maybe we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. But we had some preliminary stuff we wanted to talk about anyway.
So, I went to Boston.
Yeah.
Just to recap, because we talked about Boston the other day. And we were talking about their roads, and I came up with a good analogy of what their roads are like. When they were planning Boston, someone made a bowl of linguine and threw it down on the map. And wherever the noodles fell, that's where the roads go. It's just like they're all curving around, and you got to make like 30 right-hand turns before you can get going on to the road that you want to get to.
Did you have any... Oh, this was while you were on your media tour.
Yes.
Did you have any troubles getting around the city? Did you get turned around a couple times?
Not too bad. Like, I didn't have to double back too much. I used Google Maps, which in the latest update they've broken. It's just not... It doesn't work as well as it used to. So I used to just keep the earpiece in my ear, and wherever the lady would tell me, that's where I would just turn. But now it's more like use the left-hand lane to turn right, and take the Mass Turnpike Highway. Like there's a nice big gap between the words of what she's trying to say. Like it just...
Oh, that's really weird.
Yeah, it's not as great. So I didn't miss any turns or anything, but it's just fun. Like, okay, we got to get on the highway, but you've got to go a mile this way, come back, make another U-turn, come back again, and then turn on this road that has 3 different signs pointing at it. And they all say car lane only, but there's no sign for what the street is. But it's only for cars. I know that part. But it's fun, though. It's enjoyable.
And I can't believe after the Lightning episode, you didn't go to the Boston Museum of Science to see the Lightning show. Can't believe it.
We couldn't squeeze it in.
I know. You always have everything planned out when you take your trips anyway, right?
It's fun. Yeah, we did. It was pretty planned out. Maybe the next time. I mean, it's on the list of things to do. It just didn't make it this time. We wanted to be outside since it was like 100 degrees.
True.
Yeah.
You want to be outside when it's 100 degrees.
Got to enjoy that heat. It doesn't come around very often. Nice humidity. It's good stuff.
You know, truthfully, I don't remember how moderate Boston is.
Right.
I've never been there in the winter. When my sister lived there, I mentioned that she lived there for a number of years. I never went there in the winter. I was only there in like the spring or the summer. Or the fall, but I was never there over the winter. But I don't remember being there in the summer, and I remember it being hot. Like all cities are hot, and all that concrete and asphalt just radiate heat.
Yeah. So
I remember it being hot, but I don't remember it being oppressively hot and humid.
Yeah, it wasn't. We've been there twice in July, and they're on the coast, so they always have a nice breeze, so that helps. But they have a lot of parks, like a lot of parks.
They have a couple of big ones, too.
Very big ones, yeah. So there's one that's like 7 miles long, which is...
That's the Fenway, right?
It's next to Fenway, yeah.
But I think it's called, I think the Back Bay Fen, I think is what it's called.
It is Back Bay. I don't think they call it the Fenway, though.
I think the road that goes around it, I think it's called...
The road around Fenway is called Fenway.
Well, maybe I'd have to look back at a map again. But my sister used to live just off of that.
Oh, yeah? Off of that in Back Bay?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the most beautiful area.
Yeah.
If I could move anywhere else, that might be a spot. I imagine it's pricey, but it's beautiful there.
I imagine now it's very pricey.
Yeah, because we walked through there, and it was nice under the trees, because it's all tree-lined.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny, because we took the duck tour this time, which was interesting. I'll put it that way. It comes down to your guide, I guess. Each guide is different.
Yeah, any of those things, if you have a good guide, they can make almost anything interesting. We had just been in Western New York, a little over a month ago, and we ended up going to Lockport, which is sort of northeast of Buffalo, but it was an area along the Erie Canal where the Erie Canal made a very large drop in elevation.
Okay.
I think it was 70 feet, roughly, 60, 70 feet. Just in the town of Lockport. There wasn't even a town there at the time. There became a town because they had to put in a bunch of locks. Obviously, why it's called Lockport.
Okay.
But I think they put in 7 locks because they could only do a certain elevation change at each one.
Right.
And apparently you could wait for like weeks
to
get through the locks because each lock just emptying and filling it and only one barge would fit in it at a time. So there would be like just lines of barges lined up along the canal just waiting to go into the locks. And it could take days. So as a result, like guys would pull up there with their boats just waiting their turn. So guys would go into, a village sprang up. So they would go into the saloons and stuff to spend their money or whatever. There was an enterprising man whose name I cannot remember now for the life of me, who basically decided to dig a tunnel from the high end of the canal down to the low end, and it's just a water sluice, basically.
Okay.
But then he kind of leased it out to companies, because at the time they were still doing things with water power. The water power was still used. And so several companies built along this like water sluice, and it was huge. I mean, it was, 12 feet high, 12 feet wide. It wasn't completely circular, but it was all dug by hand.
Okay.
So it's just a really neat water tunnel. And we actually went and took a tour of it. You wouldn't think that it's really interesting. It was actually pretty interesting. Yeah. But I think a lot of it had to do with our guide. If we had a really cruddy guide, I don't think it would have been nearly as fun.
Yeah.
But because of the guide we had, he was a younger guy who was very knowledgeable and obviously enjoyed what he did.
Yeah, that's good.
So it was fun. So if you have a guide that's any good, they can make anything interesting. So it's not even a cave. It wasn't even a cave. It was literally just a hole, just like a tunnel that somebody dug that you wouldn't think would be interesting. But yeah, if you have a good guide, they can make anything interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, we actually went out to Western Maryland 2 weeks ago, I think, and did the Crystal Grotto Caverns out there.
Oh, how did you like that?
It was actually really neat.
Yeah?
But it was neat because it was neat, not because our guide was any good.
Oh.
Our guide was okay.
Yeah.
I think she could have done a much, much better job. And I think a lot of it was in her delivery. It seemed very unprofessional.
Oh.
She wasn't cursing or anything like that, but it's
like they just pulled someone off the street.
Yeah, and she was knowledgeable. She knew a lot of stuff, but the way that she delivered it and the way that she interacted with people just seemed very non-professional.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that very much. I'm paying you, and in some cases, you can pay a lot of money for that kind of stuff. And it's not cheap to go to the Crystal Grottos, but it's not terribly expensive either. But it's a really neat thing to do.
Yeah.
I anticipate something for some kind of service.
Right.
That I'm paying you for, and I anticipate it to be good. It's like when you go to a restaurant and you get just a waiter/waitress, a wait staff member who is just okay.
Yeah.
Like they're not great. They're not really good. They're not bad, but they're just there.
Yeah.
Unattentive and just, not spectacular in personality. It was kind of like that. So.
All right.
Anyway, Boston. Duck tour.
Oh, yeah. So one of the parts was Boston is only like 3 feet above sea level. It's really low. And whenever they have excess dirt, they just fill in waterways and make parks. So like they dug a big traffic tunnel.
Yeah, it was called the Big Dig.
Yeah, they're still working on it. But they take all that dirt and they put it along the river and they're making parks out of it. Which is interesting. So they just keep adding to the number of parks that they already have.
You know what the name of the river is? It goes through Boston.
Charles
River. That's the big one.
Like
the Back Bay used to be a swamp.
It was all river.
Yeah, basically. It was all a swamp.
And they filled it all in.
Yeah.
All right. So our topic for today. You want to tell us what it is?
I want you to tell us what it is.
It's racing.
It's racing.
I like the way you say it.
Racing.
Yeah, racing.
Why didn't you want to talk about racing?
We can't talk about the Formula One racing because I don't like people to talk to me about it. So the less I bring it up, the less there's a chance someone's going to tell me about it. And then they're going to spoil the results.
How do we know we're not talking about camel racing or elephant racing or, coursing or...
Well, if you're going to talk about racing, I have to talk about the pinnacle. So it's going to come up.
Oh, so we're going to be talking about...
duck racing.
Turtle racing. Turtle racing. Have you ever seen that?
It's not very exciting.
It's not
It can
exciting
be.
at all.
It
But
has its moments.
It's funny because it's the only race, seemingly the only race, where it's not in some sort of a line.
Yeah.
It's a circle. Everybody puts their turtle in the middle and just lets them go. And you sit there however long it takes for one of the turtles to go outside of the circle. And it's a big circle. It's like probably 15 feet in diameter. So one of these turtles has to walk a long way to get outside of this circle.
Yeah.
And I know turtles can be fast. I mean, that's kind of a
Some of them get moving.
Yeah.
When you go to the zoo, there's always that one or two.
Yeah, so turtle racing must be the pinnacle. That's what you're referring to, right?
Of course.
Of course. But there is all sorts of weird racing that goes on. You ever heard of race walking?
That's a weird one.
That is. It's like you're walking. I guess you can race while you walk.
I don't understand. Like, what's the cutoff before it becomes like jogging?
I don't know
how much bounce is in your head. I don't. You have to always
really
have to have.
Don't know.
I don't understand. I know it's an Olympic sport, or at least it was.
I have to look that one up. I have no idea.
Yeah, because that's the only time I've heard of it. It used to pop up.
Well, I remember as a kid seeing people in town that were quote unquote speed walkers.
Yeah.
And it's the way that they walk. It's not a run.
No.
It's the style is completely different, but it's funny to watch because it almost seems like
it's very robotic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like their midsections, almost like they're not moving.
Yeah.
At all, and their legs seem like they're going 1,000,000 miles an hour.
It does.
It's like when you run, like your whole torso is kind of twisting. You're kind of doing like this whole thing, but when you speed walk, your torso doesn't really move. The only thing that's really moving is like your arms and your legs, and they're just going super fast.
I mean, it looks like you could easily injure yourself because you're
like a herky-jerky kind of motion.
Right.
Yeah, doesn't seem fluid. But yeah, camel racing is really big in like the Middle East. I never saw it while I was there, but I remember hearing of it going on. I mean, Jordan has, I think they have like a national racetrack for camel races, but in like Saudi Arabia and all the way over to like Pakistan. I know Pakistan, Afghanistan, probably Iran. I really don't know, but definitely Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar and Bahrain and all those places. They all have camel racing. And a really strange place that they have camel racing is Australia.
Really?
They have camel racing in Australia because...
Do they have a lot of camels?
Yes. At one point, they were importing camels? I mean, that's not what you do to a camel, is it? You don't import it. It's not like a rug.
Someplace exports it.
I guess.
It's the action.
I guess at some point, because it's such a desert continent, they were bringing in camels to be used. Well, I guess, I don't know if they became unruly or they just decided...
The camels?
They just decided that whoever didn't want to use them anymore, so they just like let them go and figured out they're just going to die in the desert. Well, they didn't. They multiplied. So they got lots of camels now.
Invasive species.
More or less. They don't have like millions of them roaming the countryside, but you can find herds of... I guess it's a herd and not a pack, but a herd of camels.
I don't know what a group of camels.
And so I think they do have camel racing in Australia, but I think it's more of like a hoity-toity kind of a sport and not something that people take terribly serious. They bet on it, of course. I mean, why would
caravan. You? Sorry to interrupt you. A caravan is what a group of camels is. Or a flock. Or a train. Or a herd. But
I would imagine a caravan or a train would be in reference to, like, if you have a group of Bedouins moving from one place to another with all their camels and gear, and it's basically like a convoy going from place to place. So a flock? It's a flock of camels?
That was what Google told me. But I've told you Google has failed me. So let's see. It's commonly called caravans or flocks. That's from study.com. Sounds reputable.
I'd be more likely to call it a flock of camels than a caravan. Because to me, a caravan insinuates they're moving and they're doing something from one place to another.
I suppose so.
Did you have greyhound racing?
Did I have Greyhound? What do you mean, do I have Greyhound?
Where you grew up, did they have like a dog racetrack?
Where do you think I grew up at? No, we didn't have dog racing.
They have dog race. You didn't know this?
Oh, I know they do. That seems kind of shady, though.
What's shady about dog racing? What's different between dog racing and, like, pig racing at the fair?
Dog racing is, there's a big outcry against dog racing. Pig racing, that's just for fun. You're not breeding a pig to race and then letting it run away, race, and then just letting it die. You at least get breakfast out of it. There's
two. Oh, that's morbid, Jason. That's a very morbid turn for
dog racing.
Talking about racing pigs turning into bacon.
They have.
I don't imagine they would have much bacon on them after all that racing.
They're not bred for racing, though. Like dogs, they're bred for racing.
So are horses.
Yeah, there's a lot of outcry against that industry too.
Well,
what happens to a horse after it's done racing?
It depends.
I mean, there's a lot of bad stories.
Yeah,
you don't hear about bad champions of pig racing. Maybe there's just not a lot of
most champion racehorses, like the boys.
Not the champions. The champions live a good life. It's the mid-pack ones.
Even the mid-pack ones, a lot of them will go out to stud. They'll father or mother other racehorses.
Yeah,
and they usually live pretty well as long as they've made a bit of money in their lives. It's the back of the pack ones that wind up in the glue factory.
Yeah,
I think it was even Jerry Seinfeld in one of his last stand-up routines that they actually put out. It's like when he did it at wasn't it Radio City Music Hall or some famous place in New York City. He actually had a little routine where he talked about learning how to ride a horse. He had gone out to some ranch on a vacation, and they decided they were going to go trail riding on a horse, and he'd never ridden a horse before. And so when they asked him, what his experience level was, he was like, 0, nothing. I don't know what the scale is. And they said, okay, well, bring out glue stick.
Jeez.
Old sway back nag, But there is public outcry, I guess, against dog racing.
Yeah.
There's two different types of dog racing. There is
Greyhound.
Well, it's all Greyhound, but it's
the one where they chase the rabbit.
The one where they chase the live rabbit.
Oh, yeah. I guess that gets the most outcry.
That's called coursing, and it's
coursing?
Actually coursing.
Oh,
and it's actually been made illegal in the UK, and people don't really do it in the United States. So there's no laws against doing it. Apparently, some people were caught doing it in California a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And they managed to ban it in the county where they were caught doing it, but they put it up for the state legislature to vote on, and they weren't able to get it to pass, apparently, because it's not prolific enough and it's not common, so people don't really even know what it is. But there's the Greyhound, the oval track racing, and they generally don't chase a rabbit anymore. Now they chase it's a flag, I guess.
Is it not a stuffed rabbit? It's
no,
like a flag?
It's
just to try and get away from that?
It's like a windsock, I guess, that they put on the pole that the dogs chase.
I mean, I guess we should say why it was bad, because that rabbit usually never had a good outcome at the end.
No, and that's the problem with coursing.
Yeah.
Is that the dog kills the rabbit.
Yeah, that's the winner. That's his prize, I guess. So I guess they have to practice with other rabbits for the dog to know that that's what he's going to get.
Something weird that I didn't know, that I just found out the other day, that greyhounds, speaking of racing, greyhounds are sight hunters. Hound dogs are smell. They can smell a fox and, or a bird or a rabbit or whatever, and they can find it and flush it out. Whereas greyhounds aren't like that.
Right.
They can't smell it. If they see it, they'll chase it and they'll catch it for you.
Yeah.
But they can't smell it to flush it out, which I think is so strange. I mean, you think dogs with a really good sense of smell.
Yeah, you would think you'd see people hunting with both.
Yeah, apparently not.
That's
why hound dogs are used for hunting. Well, because people want to shoot whatever it is. They don't want the greyhound to tear it apart.
I guess they want to eat it at the...
That's why I would imagine that dog racing gets a lot of outcry because of the whole rabbit thing.
So in the apocalypse, you should get a hound dog and a greyhound so you can save your bullets.
Well, I guess.
And your arrows.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Speaking of which, we got a lot of good play on Reddit from that edition. I was really shocked.
Yeah.
Put out on a couple of different subreddits, and we got a lot of play from those. And I managed to successfully get us banned from the R Guns subreddit, and just by posting, I didn't.
Probably because you mentioned arrows.
Maybe
yeah,
that's
if you said guns are great, you probably would have been okay.
That should have been in the title of my post. Guns are great! Exclamation point.
Yeah. But you're comparing them to arrows, which is their nemesis.
Okay, so if we're going to talk about racing, we have to talk about the giant elephant in the room,
which
is NASCAR.
Yeah,
we've mentioned NASCAR once or twice in the past, but you, Jason, actually are a NASCAR fan. Is this correct?
I don't watch as much as I used to. I used to be more heavily involved in it. I mean, I watched it for a long time ago, they only had the big races on TV, so you could only watch the big races. They didn't have every race was televised. That probably didn't happen until the late 90s, I think, where they started to televise everything. They would have the big ones, the most popular ones.
I'd say the early 90s, they probably started doing that. Because I remember as I wasn't a kid then. I guess I was in high school. I remember being in high school and them having a lot of races. It wasn't during race season. It was almost every weekend there was some kind of race.
Yeah, but it wasn't everyone, though.
No, yeah.
But I think in the early 2000s, late 90s, then they started adding in the mid-tier, and then they added the truck series races.
Nobody cares about the trucks.
That was interesting to watch. It's neat to see the people who can't race in the top tier go down there and perform well.
Now, what is it about race? What draws you to racing?
I don't know. I find it exciting. The competition between the two and the one trying to pass the other one can be exciting. But I've gotten into the Formula One racing, which is, as an engineer, there's a whole lot of engineering that goes on it. That excites me now. I like to look at what they're creating. To put it in perspective, like a NASCAR car, they only have 2 tracks where they drive on a regular road. Not a regular, but a street type circuit where they turn left and right. Everything is just around in a circle. So the cars are pretty much only built to do one thing. And their budgets are relatively small. Well, at least when I was watching it in the mid-2000s, their budget for a top team was $10 to $15 million. That's what they would spend. A NASCAR goes around a circle. So they've gone to a lot of templates now. So your car can only be designed in certain ways.
Right.
So if their budget is 10 to 15 million, this was a couple of years ago, for a top team. In Formula One, their budgets are kind of hidden, so nobody really knows how much they spend. But the rumors are the top 2 teams, they're $300 to $400 million.
$300 to $400 million a year?
A year.
That is an insane amount of money.
That's a lot.
I mean, I guess outside of the United States, Formula One is racing.
Yeah.
They don't race NASCAR really anywhere else.
Australia does. They have their own form of NASCAR.
I know, but it's terrible.
It's not
of the same caliber as NASCAR.
The only main competition they have, I think, is motobike, which is motorcycles. They're pretty big too.
There's a lot of different types of that too.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of surprised. They even do ATV racing, which I find really funny. They'll race anything. You can race anything.
Yeah. Have you seen the indoor truck cross racing?
No.
I watched.
Is this on an oval track where they try to run into each other? Is it that kind of racing?
No, it's not quite like that. It's not. It's it's usually in a stadium, or some sort of stadium, or inside a stadium and outside of a stadium. And it's not completely an oval. It's some kind of, they've got extra turns in it. But they have dirt ramps that they have to jump over. And they have to drive and jump over these ramps. And then they're also racing as well. Really? It's kind of fun to watch. I've watched that on YouTube. You can watch those.
I'll have to check that out. It just seems dumb.
I wouldn't watch it all the time. Every once in a while, it's good to watch. What's the other one? Rallycross is good too.
Rallycross is really neat.
But those are hard to watch because it's usually one guy standing in a field recording, and then there goes a car. And then you got to wait 20 minutes for the next car. And it's not really head to head. They're not trying to pass each other. It's all time. But they're just nuts. So
yeah. That motorcycle racing, I told you that one of my bucket list things to do in life is to go to the Isle of Man motorcycle race.
Oh, and watch it.
But that's not one of those things. It's like, you'll just stand there on the side of a road.
Yeah.
This rural road, a motorcycle will just go flying by you at 115 miles an hour, and then you'll sit there for another 5 minutes. And another motorcycle goes by you at 115 miles. But that's,
Yeah, I think that's part of the appeal of NASCAR is if you go to a race, there's a good chance you can see a good chunk of the race. Because I've been to a Richmond race twice, and we've had seats where you can see the whole track. So
Can't you see the whole track from all the seats? I mean, the stadium's only in one spot, and it's on the side of the road. You can see the whole track.
Sometimes there's stuff in the middle that blocks you from the other side. And so, I mean, some of the tracks are like 2 miles wide, so trying to see a mile off into the distance, unless you're wearing your binoculars, it's kind of hard to watch.
You know what Jeff Foxworthy is?
Yes.
The comedian? Years ago, I saw Jeff Foxworthy perform at the opening night for Dangerfields in New York City.
Okay.
Which was New Year's Eve, 1989. So this was December 31st, 1989. I think it was open before that, but it was like the big opening night at Dangerfields in New York. And Jeff Foxworthy performed. This is before he became like Jeff Foxworthy. He was kind of like a no-name sort. I mean, he was up and coming, but nobody really knew who he was.
Yeah.
But he was talking about NASCAR, and he was talking about how dumb watching NASCAR was. And this is a redneck you're talking about, right? And he said, you sit there in the stands, and he says, as your racer comes up, it's like, woo! As your car goes by, and then you sit there in silence and wait until the next
car comes by again.
Woo! It was a hilarious skit that he did. Yeah, it's just kind of funny. To me, it just seems, as a hockey player, I don't know how many times I've seen a Zamboni go around a hockey rink.
Yeah.
Watch it every single time.
Right? That's just him by himself. Imagine if you had two out there.
You do. If you go to an NHL game, there's
Imagine
two.
if they were racing, though. That would be fun.
Sometimes I think they are.
Yeah, you see who can get done first.
But I guess I see the appeal, but it's fun,
though. There's some good races where they're fighting back and forth and they're trying to find the faster way around the guy ahead of them.
Yeah, but these races last for hours.
Yeah, that's true. It gives you enough time to watch.
Do these racers...
The NASCAR races they're long. That's one of the reasons I don't watch them as much, because...
500 miles.
That's a day's investment if you want to watch. There was a couple years I watched every race the whole time. That's what we did on Sunday.
Do you have race ritual that you do? I mean, do you have to have popcorn and snacks and drinks, or
for the big race? We would do for NASCAR when we watched Daytona 500. But it's like the Super Bowl. I mean, we would have fondue or nachos or just food.
Did you just say fondue?
Fondue. Do you not eat fondue?
No, man. Who eats fondue?
We do. At least a couple times a year. We'd probably do it more often. We should probably do that soon.
Holy cow, man. That's shocking.
You get your nice pot, melt your cheese in it, you get your skewers, and you have a whole array of foods to dip in it. What is better than dipping things into hot cheese?
Dipping things into melted chocolate, that's better. So
that's
chocolate
dessert.
Fondue, I guess, but
I
never understood the draw of fondue.
Really?
To me, fondue was always a fondant.
But do you like cheese?
Yeah, I like cheese.
Yeah, cheese is fantastic. Do you ever just sit down with a block of cheese and start eating at it?
I'll admit that I have done that, but it's usually
It's not regular?
No.
Oh, I'd probably do it a couple times a week.
What?
Yeah.
You really like cheese? I eat cheese almost every day.
Probably everyone in my house does that.
But I eat only little bits. I can't sit down with a block of cheese and just start gnawing on it like a rat.
Well, not like that. You get a knife and cut it into bits. Civilized about it.
That's just weird, man.
I don't think I'm the weird one on this side.
I'm sorry.
I went to Pittsburgh on the last tour and stopped.
Speaking of cheese.
Yeah, stopped in the strip district of Pittsburgh where they have a big cheese shop. And the guy in there was just letting me try all kinds of cheeses. What was it called? I don't know. I have to look it up. Because you can order cheese online from them, which is great. And they have all these cheeses from different parts of the world. And I got some Spanish cheese, some Italian cheese, some Belgian cheese.
I will
like the hard
say,
cheeses.
I don't like soft cheeses much.
Yeah.
I remember we were just talking about this on either the last episode or the previous one.
Yeah.
About my sense of smell and taste and how I swear like that hit to my head did something to my taste buds.
It probably happened was something else. Maybe
Brie has always been nasty to me my entire life. That's that weird soft cheese and it sits out on that plate at that party and people gnaw away on it a little bit.
No,
I really like it now.
Do you?
Yeah, I hated soft cheeses my whole life. Now I actually enjoy soft cheeses. However, I still really prefer hard cheeses.
Yeah.
I was in Italy, 18 years ago. But one of the things that I brought back, and this is probably not legal, I brought back a huge block of Pecorino.
Pecorino Romano.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
It was so good. I remember we had gotten, the people I was traveling with, we had rented a villa, so we had a kitchen. So we made our own food. We didn't go out to eat very often. Made our own dinners, and it was great because it was like a half Italian, half German mix of people that I was with, so you got actually some really good food made. But of course, we would go to like the little local, and it was in a village, it wasn't even in a city, so we'd go to the little local shop in the village, and we'd buy cheese and bread and homemade pasta and go back and make dinner. We bought this like little wedge of Pecorino Romano one night, and went back to the house and made some kind of pesto deal. And had some of that cheese with it, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is really good!" So I went back to the shop the next day, and I bought this giant. It was like half a wheel. I mean, it was enormous. Yeah. Shoved it in my luggage, just praying to God when I went through JFK on the way home that they didn't do an agricultural search on me.
No, that should be fine, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it would have been fine. I think, but it was just the amount that I took. Oh. I don't know if was too much or what. So no, I do like cheese, but I don't. And I do eat cheese almost every day. I eat a little bit of sharp cheddar.
What's a little bit?
An ounce, maybe.
Is it one of those ones in the string cheese?
No, I don't eat string cheese. That's bizarre.
Is it in the same format? Is that how you're eating your cheddar cheese? Or is it like you're chopping it off the block? Like, are you eating real cheese or are you eating that fake cheese?
No, it's not fake. No, this is Cabot. It's Cabot cheese, which is good. Vermont cheese.
Is it white or is it orange?
It's white.
Oh, good. Yeah, that is the good stuff.
No, you don't. Orange cheese is something wrong with orange cheese. If I'm eating orange cheese, it better be coming out of a can.
You just go squirt it right in there.
When I was in Jordan, it was really hard to find food. Like during the middle of the day, if we couldn't really leave post very much, if we were flying or we were doing a lot of work or whatever, like the most convenient place to go get any kind of food was at the small American compound that was like 7 miles away.
Yeah.
So we could drive through the desert and get there in, 15, 20 minutes or whatever it was. But they had a small PX there, a little post exchange where you can buy like T-shirts and shaving kits and shampoo and soap and a little bit of food. They would stock it with some food and drinks or whatever. But one of the few things they had in there that I would actually eat was those little packets of tuna fish.
Yeah.
Boxes of Triscuits, which are totally awesome. And they always had squeeze cheese or spray cheese, whatever they call that stuff. And I would buy a thing of that and a box of Triscuits, and I would just chow down. I would eat that whole can. Canned cheese is honestly, it's almost addictive. It's not very good.
No.
But it just goes down so easy.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know. How did we get on cheese? Because they're fondue for racing. Okay, right. So your other race rituals, you have anything else?
No, that's pretty much it. We used to do some other ones, but they're just kind of...
No, this was you and your dad, or you and the whole family?
Me and my wife and kids.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. So it started with me and my wife, because she would watch them too. She'd watch the races. We'd watch them together.
I got to talk to your wife about this. This is strange behavior.
It's fun to watch. It was really good. Because the other thing too is, if you're watching a race, right, you're watching everyone compete at the same time. So it's not like I'm watching a basketball game and I can watch the Wizards play the Bulls, but then I never see the Lakers play or the Celtics play. Or that's a whole different game. But when you're watching racing, you get to watch everyone, the best ones compete.
Yeah, so everybody who qualifies races on the same day.
Yeah, and pretty much everybody qualifies. That's just, unless you're like a stinker in NASCAR. The main guys all qualify every week. So you're guaranteed to see the good ones. And with Formula One, they limit the number of cars that can attempt or can race. Mm-hmm. So everybody races every week anyways. once you get granted your team license. So they're guaranteed to, unless they do something stupid or they wreck out or something. Yeah, so she watches it with me. Kids are starting to get into it a little bit. They don't invest the time into it.
I don't blame them.
But the Formula One, I wish they would change the rules a little bit. And with all racing, they've limited what they can develop just for safety.
Mm-hmm.
To make it safe enough where they don't go so fast that they just tear themselves apart. They have to limit it somehow. So they reduce the amount of complexity and engineering they can put into a car so that they don't fly into the walls. I wish they would just make the tracks like wide open, but no one would go to see it because you'd be so far away, no one would watch it. And then just let them open up their engineering capability and just do whatever they want. So I think they would go so much faster. I think that would be super exciting to watch. But now they're limited so much with what they can do that some team finds this special ability to make their car go faster, and then a couple weeks later they say, "No, you can't do that. That's not in the spirit of the rules." Or
two things.
Yes.
One, they had a couple, like 2 years in a row, they did a race in Baltimore. Did you ever go up to watch that one?
No, that wasn't Formula One. That was IndyCar. So,
what's the difference between Formula One and IndyCar? You're going to have to explain that one to me because I really don't know.
IndyCar is an American-based racing, so they only race in America. And it's similar style of cars to Formula One.
Right.
But their budgets are much smaller. They're into the $15 million, $10 million range.
Okay.
And their engines are smaller, and they have more of a template for their cars. So they're limited in what they can develop. So they go much slower, too. So there's one track where they both compete on, the Formula One and the IndyCar, and that's in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Because they have a really nice facility they just opened there.
Mm-hmm.
And the speed differences between the two cars was astounding.
Really?
Yeah, it was a large order of magnitude per lap that they were different, from the fastest car of the IndyCar to even the slowest car in the Formula One. Very big difference. But I mean, you're talking at least 10 times difference in budget, so of course they can develop. And the Formula One engines they're amazing things as well. They're at least 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah,
and they're limited to that, so it's something else.
Well, and the other thing, this goes back to spectators wanting to watch racing.
Yeah.
When you watch NASCAR and there's an accident, you see like any accident you could see on the highway. The car hits the wall, gets banged up, rolls around a little bit, but the car is more or less, unless it's an extremely catastrophic accident,
they just keep going.
The car's more or less still in one piece.
Yeah.
You don't have like chunks of the car everywhere.
Right.
Watching Formula One crashes, it is absolutely shocking because so much, since it's open wheel, like so much of the actual components of the car are outside of the fuselage. We'll call it a fuselage because it's more apropos than calling it a body, I guess. But so much of the material is outside. They hit a wall or they start flopping around. Stuff gets ripped off.
Yeah,
there's
shatters.
Like parts flying everywhere. And I would be willing to bet, and I don't know the answer to this, and you could probably tell me, but I'd be willing to bet there have been more deaths in Formula One racing than in NASCAR racing. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like Formula One accidents generally tend to be catastrophic. You don't find too many where, I guess it happens a lot where guys run into a wall and they snap an axle and wheels hanging off and then they're done.
Right.
You see that happens probably a fair amount because you have so much sticking out when they have an actual accident. Where cars hit each other, cars go flying off into the air. They've gone flying into the crowds. This is totally crazy.
Yeah. The last 20 years, it's gotten surprisingly safer. There was one death in the last 5 years, which was an odd circumstance. So when Formula One races, if it rains, they just keep going. Unless it's a torrential downpour, where you can't even see.
And those are open cockpit.
Yeah. It had rained and the track had gotten slippery and a car had slowed down and the car behind it was coming in too fast. So he veered off to the side at a spot where the track was slippery and there had just been a car the lap before had wrecked, slid off the track and hit the wall. He was fine. But when the cars wreck, they usually have, I don't know what they're called. It's like it's like a giant forklift. That big 4 wheels that drives out onto the side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
They there's a hook on the top of the car, and they just put a strap on it and pick it up and just cart it off.
Yeah.
So their cleanup is relatively quick. But they had one of those on the side, and another car came around the turn, slid off the track, and slid right into that giant forklift. And the car went underneath
it. Yeah.
The driver hit his head into the back of the forklift at, I don't know, like 90 miles an hour. That's what their slow speeds are.
And no helmet is going to protect your coconut from that.
No, because it just didn't end well. And it was unfortunate because he was really young and upcoming driver. And then I think the last accident happened, a spring had fallen off of another guy's car and flew through the air and hit another driver in the head. Messed him up pretty badly. But he ended up coming back like the next year to continue racing. His speech was pretty messed up for a while, but he recovered significantly well.
Because he probably hit that spring, which weighs 20 pounds.
It probably wasn't even that much. It was probably like 5.
Oh, I guess these are Formula One, so they're probably extremely light. But either way, 5 pounds hitting the darn thing at 150 miles an hour or whatever it probably was.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
Yeah, that's not good at all.
For the most part, they have these tub assemblies that the driver has to sit in, and now they have a new bar that goes across in front of the driver's head that a lot of the drivers didn't like because they felt it took away from the danger of the sport. But they had a couple close calls where cars will hop over the other cars just going through the turns.
Yeah.
And this is supposed to help the car from like landing on it. But they said the strength of that bar, you could park a bus on top of it and it wouldn't give away. That's how much engineering they put into just this little bar that goes across.
Right.
But yeah, they've gotten much safer. The little monocoque is, but the rest of it just falls apart.
Yeah, this is why you like Formula One racing. It's the engineering that goes into it, right?
And they have, depending on the announcers, there was a couple years ago, they had American announcers, and they would go through a lot of the engineering part, and that was really neat. The ones now, you have to do a little bit more research, but a lot of people go into explaining like what each part does and like you'll go to a track and you'll develop your car completely different than everybody else, and then they'll do the trade-offs, like why is this fin shaped differently than the other car's fin, and how does that focus the air into the air box that's in the back, and how does it make it difficult for the car to drive behind it. So it's neat. I like listening to all that technical stuff.
No, I think that's pretty cool. I just can't watch it. That's really the thing. I think the engineering is really neat. NASCAR, that's so redneck for me. I don't think I could do it. Formula One, I could kind of understand a little bit. I did used to work with a guy who was a big Formula One fan.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this before on the podcast, so I won't get into it much, but he just loved Formula One. And this is when we were overseas together.
Yeah.
And he loved it because he could actually watch the races live.
Yeah.
As opposed to being in the States and having to, he could watch them live in the States, but he'd have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it was, in order to be able to watch it.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it was at a normal, what would be considered like normal time,
Yeah. Yeah, they race all over, but their prime viewing audience is in Europe. So they try to make it midday Europe when the race goes. So if it's in, I don't know, like in Asia, they make it a late night race. And then if it's in America, they make it earlier in the day.
Racing.
It's fun stuff.
I know. I'm surprised you went in such depth.
I didn't even touch the surface. There's so much.
I know. We could probably do
another show.
Another hour.
Yeah. I didn't even get to talk about the brakes. How strong the brakes are.
How strong are the brakes? Is this a joke? It's like Johnny Carson?
No, because they do like...
The brakes on a Formula One car are so strong. How strong are they?
It's like Mobil 1 is a big sponsor. It was a big sponsor at one time for NASCAR and Formula One. So they would do like these crossover events where they would have a NASCAR driver drive a Formula One car and a Formula One driver drive a NASCAR.
It's a downgrade for those guys. They probably hated it.
Yeah. But the NASCAR drivers always said the acceleration is fantastic, but the braking would almost rip your head off just because you brake so much. So the force is so strong. In fact, there was a race a couple years ago where a guy was driving into the corner and he slammed on his brakes and his wheels broke off because the force was just too hard. Both of them just popped off the side. He ended up sliding into the sand pit. And then you have to use them, like you have to keep them hot because they're not made out of steel. They're made out of
ceramic
carbon and stuff.
Yeah.
It's neat.
You're sort of a gearhead in the sense you work on your own vehicles, you wrench on your own cars.
Yeah.
Do you do your own brake jobs?
I've done them on my truck a little bit.
What kind of brake pads you put on there?
I couldn't remember.
What do you mean you can't remember?
It was a while ago.
I'm not saying I don't need to know the brand. Do you put on standard or do you put on ceramic?
Ceramic.
Yeah, I always put on ceramic. They last so much longer.
Well, see,
they're not much more expensive.
My old truck, I had a lot of brake problems with it, where I had an S10, which I thought would be this great truck because there would be a lot of parts and it was around for a long time. But man, I don't know what they were thinking, but they made the rotors didn't match the strength of the pads. So you would change your brakes and within couple thousand miles, it would warp the drums. It would
warp the rotors
every time. And ended up, I just took it to places to try and figure it out. And it took me a long time to figure out what the problem was.
That was an issue with my wife's. She actually bought a first-generation Chevy Equinox.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, was a great vehicle. We had the darn thing for 10 years, and it was awesome. Yeah. We never had any problems with it. Nothing really major ever happened. But the one issue that kind of came up about 4 or 5 years into ownership is it became evident that the braking system was not designed well for the weight and the size of the vehicle.
Yeah.
It stopped okay, but it seemed to destroy brake pads.
Yeah.
It would eat right through them, and it was because the car was so heavy. It was probably more of like a light vehicle braking system, so it was probably something like off of Malibu or something that they just kind of adapted to this car, but didn't really account much for the difference in the weight. So I had to do brake jobs on that car. It seemed like once a year I was doing brake jobs on the darn thing. Like I was just replacing the pads, and every other one I would end up having to replace the rotors too. Because it would warp them.
Yeah.
Just because you had to, you really those, braking so much. And I used to kind of tease my wife and say that it was the way that she drives, which it kind of is. She's sort of, her father refers to her as Mario Andretti. Like Jackrabbit starts and Jackrabbit stops.
Yeah.
Like she will be right behind somebody and this person in front of her starts braking. She doesn't always brake right away. And it's like, darn it, just you see their brake lights come on, at least let off the gas. Start slowing down. But I do like it, and maybe I'll give it a shot in the future. I don't know. We'll see.
If you wanted to watch one, the last race was a really good one. They were in Silverstone in England. There was a lot of head-to-head racing throughout the whole race. And then the ending, it just kind of fell apart. But first 20 laps, if you don't like the first 20 laps of that one, then you won't like it.
Well, I think what would have to happen is I would have to watch a race with somebody who was into racing.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have lots of questions.
Yeah.
Most of them are going to be dumb questions, like, this is exciting because, and then I would have to get an explanation. Oh, it's exciting because, this and that. Well, now I understand a little more. Maybe it is a little bit exciting.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of kind of stuff like that. You'd have to sit down and watch a race with me and explain it.
Yeah.
Because, again, I don't get it. Now, we've kind of talked about racing now for a while, and we're 40 some odd minutes into it after our little faux pas with the computer. You want to talk about license plates?
Yeah, I'll save that for another day.
You want to save it for another time?
Yeah. That's a good 10 or 15 minutes.
I am embarking on our next media tour. Yeah, I'm leaving
spreading the word.
Tomorrow, spreading the word of conversational chaos through the country. Oh, and we did learn something interesting yesterday, something good yesterday.
Yes.
We went, we're doing our pod track. We are now completely bi-coastal.
That's right.
We have hit, I don't remember the number of states. Was it 40? We're like 45 states, 44 states. We're only missing a couple. We're missing Montana and Wyoming. We have to hit something that gets in that area.
Yeah.
North Dakota, South Dakota, Hawaii, and New Mexico maybe. I don't know. But we've hit every other state with downloads. And I was flabbergasted by that. That's totally awesome.
Yeah, we needed to cross. We were trying to cross the U.S., and we needed Missouri.
Missouri or Iowa.
Yeah, so we were going to do a special thing about the Arch. Maybe that'll have to come for another day for all our Missouri listeners.
Yeah, so it's been impressive that we've actually gotten a bunch of states, which is excellent. We've gotten several countries. New one just the other day was Portugal. We had never gotten downloads from Portugal before.
Right.
We've gotten a good number of downloads from Australia, Russia, UK, France, Germany, South Africa. I thought that was a strange one. But we're strangely missing Oh, we've got Brazil.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. I guess Brazil, they speak Portuguese. So
maybe it's
in Portugal, who knows? Maybe it's the same person.
Maybe they're spreading the word themselves.
Yeah,
Thank you to all the Portuguese people.
Yeah. So we'll reiterate. If you're listening in a foreign country, please, absolutely, drop us a line, send us your address, and we will send you a little package, of some propaganda material. Yeah. And maybe a little gift. So.
And if you're listening from one of those states we say we don't have it, it's probably just we can't figure out all the data.
It is bizarre because some of the data, like it lists like all the states. We can break it down by state. It'll tell us number of downloads by state if we want. And at the bottom, there's always that one that just says other.
Other.
What other? Where do these others come from? And there's so many that fall into the other category, and it's like a few hundred.
Right.
That are in other. So we don't really know where they're coming from. We just know that they're from somewhere in what the program decides is the United States, and it just doesn't say where it's from.
Right.
So very strange.
Unless it's like Puerto Rico, because they're not a state.
Or Guam.
Could be all the fans in Guam.
No, Puerto Rico is listed as its own country in that list because we did have a download. We had downloads in Puerto Rico. Okay. Because I did see that on the list. But it could be Guam or American Samoa or Marshall Islands or
Native American tribal land.
Native American tribal land. That's possible. Yeah. It's quite possible. So we've gotten a really good response, and I'm excited to kind of share that with everybody.
Good.
So what are we up to now?
Yeah, so if you send us feedback, tell us you're listening. Tell us. I'm curious what people are doing while they listen, because I have a feeling people don't sit down and just plop on the couch and listen to us. I wonder if most people listen to us in their car or if they're doing other stuff. But if you send us feedback, please use our email or even our Instagram. I hope people aren't sending us stuff through Twitter because we haven't been so active on that. Maybe one of these days we'll get going on that.
I think we needed to focus. Right. And I think we
expanded too quickly.
Yes. So we've focused back on Instagram. Facebook we haven't really gotten back into. We really need to do that because that's a big medium as well. I did want to mention one more thing, and I'm going to have to give the Crazy Irishman a shout out again because he keeps
commenting.
He commented again, contacted us, and he said that we made his day because he binged, he caught up.
Yeah.
And so when I gave him the shout out, I think it was 2 episodes ago now, he heard it and he was so excited. He sent us a message just saying how we made his day and got my shout out on the show today. Thank you very much. So I'm going to give you a shout out again, Crazy Irishman. It was great. So I'm glad you're listening and hey, man, spread the word. Yeah, get it out to your friends and family. And so now we have another super fan.
Yeah.
We have the super fan, and now we've got Crazy Irishman.
Yep.
So send us some listener updates and information, anything you would like us to talk about. Other than that, I think that's going to wrap it up for today, Jason. What do you say?
That's good.
You think it's good?
I think it's good.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and look forward to doing this again.
Have a nice day.